Parents declared, "You're not invited to the cabin." Then learned the bank wouldn't refinance without my signature. Dad said his line with that smug finality he uses when he thinks he's winning an argument. We were on a three-way FaceTime. Me propped against my laptop at my tiny kitchen table, them in their living room with the ugly stone fireplace and the too large TV. Mom sat slightly behind him on the couch, only half in frame, clutching a throw pillow like it was a life jacket. I remember blinking at the screen, the words taking a second to land. Before I could even respond, Dad's phone buzzed on the coffee table in front of him. He glanced down, saw the caller ID, and swiped to answer on speaker. "Hey, Mark," he said, eyes still on me, almost amused. "Yeah, we're just talking to our daughter now about the cabin refinance." That's when I heard the guy on the other end say, "That's actually why I'm calling Bob. We can't move forward without all property owners signing, and Emily's name is on the deed." There was this moment where nobody spoke. Dad's eyebrows twitched together like maybe he hadn't heard right. Mom's grip on the pillow tightened. I saw her knuckles go white. My own heart did a weird flip. Suddenly I could hear my fridge humming in my apartment, the faint traffic outside, the little hiss of static from the speakerphone in their living room. "What do you mean, all property owners?" Dad asked, that falsely polite tone creeping in. Mark repeated it. "All property owners." "But she's..." Dad jabbed a finger at the screen, like the loan officer could see me. "She's not really an owner, we just..." It was for paperwork. My cheeks burned even though no one was looking at me directly. Mark, bless him, stayed neutral. "Her name's on both the title and the current mortgage, Bob. Legally she is an owner. We'll need her signature on the new loan documents." It was a Sunday afternoon in early April, 2 weeks before Memorial Day weekend, when this all kicked off. I'm 31. My parents are late 50s, and the cabin has been the centerpiece of my family mythology since before I was born. It's this small, slightly crooked A-frame on a lake about 3 hours from where we live. My grandparents bought the land cheap in the 70s, when it was mostly fishing shacks and bush. The story goes that Grandpa and Dad built it with their bare hands. In reality, Grandpa and a contractor built most of it, and Dad and his brothers showed up on weekends to hammer nails and take pictures. As kids, we got the curated version. Faded photos on the wall, Dad telling the story of our cabin, like it was proof we were a close, hardworking family and not just a collection of people who shared DNA and unresolved issues. I loved that place. Not in the romanticized postcard way, with perfect sunsets and laughing around the fire 24/7. But in the way a kid loves the only place they ever felt their nervous system unclench. At the cabin, the rules were softer. We still had chores, but Dad's voice didn't bounce off the walls the same way. My older brother, Kyle, was less of a terror when he had docks to jump off and fish to catch. The air smelled like pine and lake water instead of bleach and whatever candle Mom used to mask tension. There were still moments, of course. Dad getting drunk and yelling when I let the screen door slam. Mom snapping because I tracked sand into the cabin. Kyle jokingly holding me underwater a second too long. But there were also mornings where I sat on the deck in an oversized hoodie, drinking hot chocolate while the mist rose off the lake, feeling okay, sometimes even happy. When things at home were bad, I'd count down to the next cabin weekend like a prisoner marking the walls. Money-wise, the cabin was never straightforward. My grandparents paid it off decades ago, but by the time I was in high school, my parents had taken out a home equity line on it for renovations that mysteriously turned into a new SUV and a kitchen remodel in our regular house. Then there were unexpected expenses. A new roof, septic repairs, dock replacement. I remember hushed conversations about interest rates and, "We'll sort it when we refinance." I also remember the constant refrain, "This cabin is the family legacy. One day it'll be yours and Kyle's." Fast forward to when I was 24. I just finished grad school, working my first real job, still living in a crappy share house. The cabin needed another round of major repairs. The old furnace died midwinter, pipes froze and burst, and the insurance company gave them a headache about it. My parents called me one night, voices weirdly cheerful. "We have an opportunity. Dad said. The bank will give us a great rate on a refinance, but they want more income on the application. If we put your name on the mortgage and the deed, it'll go through no problem. And you'll officially own a quarter of the cabin. It's an investment for your future. I remember sitting on my saggy couch, phone pressed to my ear, imagining my name on that address. My cabin, a little piece of stability, felt huge. Are you sure? I asked. I don't have much savings. What if something happens and you can't pay? Dad laughed. We've never missed a payment in our lives, Em. Don't be dramatic. We're not asking you for money, just your signature. It's basically a formality. Mom chimed in, and when we're gone, there won't be messy legal stuff. You'll already be on there. It's smart. I was still in that phase where I thought doing what my parents asked meant I was a good daughter. So I went to the bank, signed a stack of papers I barely understood, and walked out feeling oddly proud. My name, printed in neat black ink next to theirs, under borrower and owner. I took a selfie with the folder in the parking lot and texted it to my best friend like I'd done something adult and important. Of course, my therapist would later point out that they'd effectively tied me to a piece of property and to their financial choices without ever really explaining the risks. At the time, though, it felt like trust, belonging. Then came the last few years. Short version. I burnt out hard at 27, ended up in therapy, crawled out of a depression I'd been calling being tired for a decade, and started seeing my family dynamic with horrifying clarity. The constant belittling, the way my parents made jokes at my expense at every gathering. The way Cal could literally punch a hole in the wall and Mom would say, "He's just stressed." While I get the silent treatment for 3 days for leaving a mug in the sink, I began setting small boundaries. Please don't comment on my weight. I'm not comfortable being the butt of jokes. If you yell at me, I'm going to leave. Things like that. To my parents, it was like I joined a cult. Every "I feel" statement was met with, "You've been talking to that therapist again." The final straw pre-cabin gate was Christmas. We were at my parents' house. Dad made a joke at the table about how Emily always was the sensitive one, crying over nothing, complete with an impression of me as a child. Everyone laughed. I stared at my plate, heart pounding, then heard my own voice say, "I cried because you were screaming at me, not because I was sensitive." The room went dead quiet. Dad's face hardened. Mom hissed, "Not now." Later that night, when I wouldn't apologize for ruining Christmas, Dad called me ungrateful. I left early and didn't answer their calls for a week. We were still in that shaky, half-estranged place when they called about Memorial Day at the cabin. "We're doing a big family weekend," Mom said, overly bright. "Kyle and Jenna and the kids, some of Dad's colleagues, maybe Uncle Rob if he can make it. It'll be fun. We can reset after everything." I paused. "Is this a real invitation or the kind where you spend the whole time making digs about therapy?" She tootayed. "We just want things to go back to normal, honey." "Normal hurt me," I said. She went quiet. "Well, if you're going to come with an attitude, I'm going to come with boundaries," I said. We left it there, unresolved. 2 days later, Dad texted asking to video chat to talk logistics. That was the call that turned into the "you're not invited" declaration. The lead up to it was them trying to sound reasonable. "We've been thinking," Dad began, in that tone that always means he hasn't actually been thinking at all. "Given how tense things have been, it might be better if you sit this cabin trip out." I stared at his face on my laptop screen. "Because I asked you not to mock me? Because you make everything about your feelings," he snapped. "We don't want drama around the grandchildren. They deserve a peaceful holiday." I felt that familiar mix of rage and shame twist in my gut. "You realize I've never raised my voice around your grandchildren, right?" I said. Meanwhile, Kyle called his 4-year-old an idiot in front of everyone at Easter, and no one batted an eye. Mom jumped in. "We're not relitigating all that," she said. "This is simple. We're not inviting you this time. You can come later in the summer, maybe. We'll see." Something in me went very still. So you're excluding the only daughter who is legally and financially tied to that property, I said. Dad scoffed. Oh, please. We let you put your name on it. Don't act like you built the place. And then his phone rang. Which brings us back to Mark, the loan officer, explaining, very calmly, that whatever story my parents told themselves about my name being for paperwork wasn't how the law saw it. Can we just take her off? Dad asked, sounding both irritated and rattled. It's our cabin. Not without her consent, Mark said. And there may be tax and transfer implications. I really recommend you speak to a solicitor if you're considering changing ownership. I was very aware of how loud my own breathing sounded in my tiny kitchen. After they hung up, Dad turned back to me, face thunderous. Did you know about this? He demanded. I blinked. Know about what? That when I signed as a co-borrower and co-owner 7 years ago, I became a co-owner. Mom's eyes were shiny with tears. You wouldn't really make this difficult, would you? She asked. You know how much this refinance means. The interest is killing us. And we want to do some upgrades before Kyle's kids get older. I had this strange out-of-body feeling, like I was hovering above the scene watching it play out. The same people who just uninvited me from family space were now panicking because they needed my legal cooperation to keep it. My petty side spoke first. Well, I said slowly, the good news is you won't have to worry about my feelings at the cabin if you can't refinance and lose it. Mom gasped. That's not funny, Emily. I sighed and rubbed my eyes. Look, I said, dropping the sarcasm. I'm not trying to ruin anything. But do you get how messed up it is to tell me I'm not welcome at a place you've also made me financially liable for? They both started talking at once. Accusations, guilt, the greatest hits. You're twisting this. We were just setting a boundary. You always play the victim. Fine, we'll just sell it and see if you like that. When we finally hung up, I sat there in the quiet for a long time, staring at the dead laptop screen. My chest hurt. My stomach hurt. My head hurt. There was a part of me that wanted to call Mark myself and sign whatever they needed just to make the whole thing go away. That's the part that's kept me in their orbit for 31 years. If I just appease them, things will be calm. But there was another part, the one therapy has been painstakingly growing, that whispered you get a say. You are allowed to consider your own safety. I booked an extra session with my therapist. I brought all the paperwork I had from the original refinance. We went through it line by line. She isn't a lawyer, but she is very good at asking questions I don't want to ask myself. What happens if you sign? She asked. I guess they get a better rate, lower payments, I said. They're less stressed. The cabin stays. Nothing changes. Nothing? She repeated. Well, they keep treating me the same, probably, I admitted. I stay tied to them financially. If they default, it affects my credit. If something happens to them, I'm on the hook for sorting things out with Kyle, who thinks I'm a traitor because I talk about childhood stuff too much. And if you don't sign, they might lose the cabin, I said. The words made my stomach twist. Or have to sell. They'll hate me. The whole extended family will probably hate me. I'll be the villain who let the cabin go. She nodded. So both options have grief, she said. Which one aligns more with you protecting your future self? I chewed my thumbnail, staring at the papers. I don't actually want them to lose it, I said quietly. I just don't want to be tied to it anymore if I'm not actually part of the family, beyond being a convenient name on a loan. What about a third option? She said. Is there a way for you to either be bought out of your ownership or for the new loan to remove you entirely? That way you're not blocking them, but you're also not hanging in legal limbo. That idea sat in my brain like a seed. Practical, complicated, potentially explosive. I talked to an actual lawyer next. A free half-hour phone consult with a property solicitor who, unlike my parents, spoke in clear, non-gaslight sentences. He explained that yes, I was an owner. No, they couldn't just remove me. Yes, I had the right to refuse to sign a refinance that kept me on the hook. Yes, I could propose conditions. You can request they either refinance without you and take you off title, which would require a transfer, or that they buy your share at market value, he said. Depending on the original agreement. Was there anything in writing? I laughed. No. Just a lot of "we're family, we don't need paperwork." He made a sympathetic noise. Common, he said. Look, I can't tell you what to do emotionally, but legally you have more power here than they led you to believe. Use it carefully. Carefully ended up looking like an email, drafted and redrafted until the words stopped shaking on the screen. I sent it to my parents 3 days after the FaceTime call. In it, I said, I understand the cabin is important to you. I am not comfortable remaining jointly liable on a new loan, given our current relationship and history of conflict. I am willing to sign documents if the refinance removes me from both the mortgage and the deed, or if we reach a fair agreement where you buy out my share based on a professional valuation, transferring full ownership to you or you and Kyle. Until one of those options is on the table, I will not be signing. I hit send with my heart in my throat. The response was immediate and nuclear. How dare you turn this into a financial transaction? Mom wrote back. Family doesn't do this to each other. Dad left a voicemail full of words like extortion and blackmail, and after everything we've done for you. Kyle texted me, you seriously trying to cash in on the cabin? Wow. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I forwarded my email and their responses to the lawyer, asking if I'd said anything problematic. He wrote back, you were clear. Their emotional reaction doesn't change the legal reality. The next week was a mess. Mom called crying, toggling between apologizing for maybe being too harsh at Christmas and accusing me of holding them hostage. Dad sent long texts late at night about legacy, and Grandpa would be rolling in his grave. My favorite, though, was the one where he wrote, you're acting like some stranger instead of our daughter. I stared at that one for a long time before replying, you uninvited me from the family cabin and have spent the last year calling me crazy for going to therapy. Which role do you want me to play? We went back and forth like that for days. It was emotionally exhausting and also weirdly clarifying. Every time they accused me of being cold or greedy, it highlighted just how entitled they felt to my compliance. At some point, Grandma called. She's not legally involved in any of this, but she hears things. I heard there's drama about the cabin, she said, as if we were discussing weather. There is, I said. They're mad I won't quietly sign something that keeps me tied to them financially while they tell me I'm not family enough for holidays. She made a disgruntled sound. Your father forgets that being loud doesn't make him right, she said. I don't understand all the mortgage business, but I do understand this. If someone says, you're not invited, they don't get to be shocked when you don't act like part of the group. Thanks, Grandma, I said, voice wobbling. In the end, the bank forced their hand more than I did. Mark, the loan officer, it turned out, wasn't thrilled about the idea of keeping a reluctant co-borrower on a refinance. From the bank's perspective, he told Dad and then told me when I called him myself, we'd prefer all parties be fully informed and consent freely. If Emily's not comfortable, we either keep the existing arrangement or restructure. Restructure ended up meaning this. They had the cabin appraised. The number came back higher than any of us expected. The area had become a lot more popular since the 70s. Suddenly, my hypothetical quarter share had a very real dollar amount attached. Dad called, deflated. We can't afford to buy you out and do the renovations, he said. The point of the refinance was to lower our payments, not add more. You could sell, I said quietly. Silence. That cabin is our history, he said eventually. It's also my future liability, I replied. The thing about history is, sometimes it's a story people tell to avoid dealing with the present. My history with that cabin wasn't just fishing and esmores. It was also crying on the bunk bed because Dad drunkenly called me useless in front of his friends. It was being the one to clean mold out of the bathroom because you're the only one who does it right. It was taking 2 vacation days from my crappy job at 24 to sit at the bank and sign papers that put me on the hook for their choices. In the end, we landed on a compromise I'm still making peace with. They refinanced in their names only with a different bank, which involved paying off the existing loan entirely and doing a new one. To do that, they had to remove me from the title first. That meant a transfer of my share back to them, which, per the solicitor, should have come with compensation. They couldn't afford the full 25% of the appraised value. We negotiated, through gritted teeth on their end, through a lot of tears on mine. A smaller lump sum that covered roughly what I'd have spent if they'd defaulted, plus some. It wasn't entirely fair in the abstract. It was fair enough for me to feel okay signing. We met at the solicitor's office to do the transfer. The cabin, on paper, stopped being mine that day. In the lobby afterwards, Mom reached for my hand. "We didn't think it would come to this," she said. "Me neither," I said. "But you made it clear the cabin was yours socially. Now it's yours legally too. At least everything matches." She flinched. "You know we didn't mean it like that when we said you weren't invited," she said. "We were just setting a boundary," I finished for her. "Yeah, so was I. We haven't fully come back from it." They went to the cabin that Memorial Day without me. I saw pictures on Facebook. Kids on the dock, Dad holding up a fish, Mom's caption about precious family time. It stung. It also didn't kill me, which is something I wouldn't have believed a few years ago. I spent that weekend at a cheap Airbnb near the coast with friends instead. We cooked, watched dumb movies, went for walks. Nobody mocked me for leaving a towel on a chair. Nobody rolled their eyes when I said I needed half an hour alone to decompress. Sometimes I miss the cabin with an ache that feels like homesickness. Then I remember how small and brittle I felt there most of the time, like a guest in a place I'd been promised and then had to earn over and over. My parents still tell people they had to buy me out because I got weird about money. I don't bother correcting the narrative with extended family. The people who matter know the truth. My credit report knows the truth. My nervous system knows the truth. Parents declared, "You're not invited to the cabin." Assuming the cabin was theirs in every way that mattered. The bank, the law, and eventually me disagreed. If there's a moral, I guess it's this: if you're going to treat someone like they're disposable, don't also tie them to your assets and expect eternal cooperation. And if you're the someone, you're allowed to look at the contract, emotional and legal, and decide it doesn't work for you anymore.